In today's episode, I'll get into a few things because it's an interesting area. So first things first, what makes a good suburb? Second of all, where these are predominantly located. Third of all, the numbers behind good suburbs. And then finally, the suburbs themselves. Let's get into it. What makes a good suburb in Perth? It's interesting because, as I said, in all areas, strong demographics and consistently low supply do play a part in Perth, most definitely. But in Perth, because it's quite dispersed and it's a little bit different from, your East Coast, should I say, counterparts, employment centres and industry do play a large part. Not all of Perth has good employment around it. Lifestyle triangle as well. It is quite a seaside, obviously, city, and having a good lifestyle does play a large part, particularly in areas that have both employment centres and a good lifestyle triangle. You probably want the area to be landlocked with no future development. You'll hear what I have to say later about that. Proximity to key infrastructure and long-term residents are important as well, because a lot of Perth is based on resources. So some areas are very heavy in terms of your FIFO workers, and when the actual industry goes out the door, what you'll find is there won't be as many people actually looking in those suburbs, so the demand will go down but the supply will stay the same, which isn't good for long-term capital growth. Where are these predominantly located? Look, idealistically, these are pretty much your best places to buy in Perth. That's firstly Joondalup. Then secondly, I've said the inner west and city coastal region. So for those that don't know what I mean, it's kind of pretty much if you want to line up sort of Scarborough sort of into the city and then sort of draw a line straight towards Fremantle and take the western side of that, so along the coast. Fremantle as well, and also some suburbs in the inner south also are quite good, but predominantly the top three locations I've got there are definitely the best. The numbers behind good suburbs. I've described this recently. I look for a total return, and that's your 30-year capital growth plus your gross rental yield. I like that number being at least 12%, idealistically 13% and above. And of that 13%, I prefer it when the capital growth component is higher, and that's simply because capital growth stays stagnant over the long term, not stagnant, but over the long term, it reverts to its long-term average, whereas gross rental yield will slide down because capital growth will always outdo it. So your internal rate of return will always be higher when your element of capital growth is high in terms of your total return. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, have a look in throughout my episodes and you'll see me describe that in greater detail. But anyway, let's get into it. So let's start with suburbs under $700,000, and the first suburb we're going to mention is a suburb called Nollamara. And Nollamara itself is a good suburb. It's basically just north of the CBD. Not a lot of people would probably know where it is, but it's actually quite a good suburb because it's not an original sort of mortgage belt suburb that you'd get in Perth that would be under $700,000, like your Eglintons, like your Yancheps, like your Old Chemos, the ones in the far north, or Baldivis in the south. Nollamara is actually a suburb that is a fairly old suburb, so it's an existing estate that's been there for a number of decades now, and it's actually got quite good demographics. So this is just off the census in 2021. Median weekly household income, $1,492 a week. Median monthly mortgage repayments, $1,582, which is really good numbers because that means people can actually afford their mortgages very easily. And also, not only saying that, but because it's an older suburb, you'll have longer term residents who would have no mortgage there as well, which is good. That is actually quite rare for Perth, as funny as it sounds, but Nollamara is a very good suburb to consider if you're looking to buy in Perth, most definitely. Let's get into under $800,000, and to be honest, right now this is very hard to find, but I'm still finding them sometimes in this area, and that suburb is in Craigie. So obviously, for people that don't know, I did previously mention the region of Joondalup being a good area to buy. Craigie is within that region. To be honest, the median of Craigie now is around 900, but you still do pick the odd one up under 800. Just be a little bit careful about where you buy in Craigie because it is a bit dispersed where you should buy. So there's some pockets that you shouldn't, others that are great. So just be careful of that. But look, really, Craigie is cheap in an expensive pocket. So it's right near Hillary's, and you can see Woodvale on the other side of it as well, being significantly more expensive. But really, Craigie is actually better located, which is a really good thing. So For those that are looking for something that will have a little bit more in the tank, Craigie is definitely a good option in Perth. The suburb I'm going to mention under 900k is Chewett Hill. Look, for those that don't know where it is, it's kind of in the inner northern area of Perth. There is a lot of industrial area of Chewett Hill, but there is still houses you can pick up here for under 900k, believe it or not. Now, the suburb itself is basically right next to Osborne Park. So look, Osborne Park is one of the major employment hubs of Perth. And also obviously the Perth CBD does employ quite a few people as well. But where Chewett Hill is really one of the best locations you can think of in all of Perth, really. Like, it is obviously, as I said, right next to Osborne Park. It's straight down the road from Scarborough, basically the Bondi of Perth. And if you go north as well, it's not overly far from Joondalup either, and it doesn't overly take too long, which is a good thing. So just something to consider there. Look, Chewett Hill's location is exceptional. I don't think you can go too wrong here. It is an older estate as well. A lot of long-term residents here. You'll find there are quite a few, should I say, medium density dwellings here. There's no real high rises, but there's quite a few sort of townhouse dwellings on larger blocks. But if you have an original block here, even if it's a smaller original block, you'll do very well, and this will do well sort of long term as well. So definitely something to consider under $900,000 in Perth. Let's get it under $1 million, and don't get me wrong, this is going to be very tight. I do still find them for under $1 million here, but that suburb is Innaloo. So for those that don't know where Innaloo is, it's basically just inland of Scarborough. So this is just an overhead of Innaloo. In the distance there is Scarborough, and that's just your Bunnings Warehouse and kind of industrial area of Innaloo. But look, Innaloo as well, like to Chewett Hill, has also, funny enough, they are very close, but it's on basically your seaside of Osborne Park. It's the easiest way to describe it. It's basically two suburbs away from Scarborough. You just got Scarborough, then Double View, then Innaloo. It's quite a family-based suburb as well, which is a good thing. So, Innaloo, it is full of basically families with children especially. It's right near Karrinyup, the main kind of, should I say, shopping centre of sort of your Scarborough region, Trigg and that, all those sorts of areas. So good area to buy because of that. And, you can't really go wrong being right next to Osborne Park, not far from Joondalup or the city either. And, obviously you're quite close to your wealthier suburbs of Perth as well, being City Beach, Peppermint Grove, Claremont, all those sorts of suburbs too. So you can't really go too wrong buying in Innaloo for under $1 million. It is tight, but I do still see them for under $1 million at the moment. Let's look at under 1.25 million, and consistently, as I've said, you'll find a lot of these are in Joondalup and sort of the inner west and city beaches area, and that suburb I'm going to mention now is Scarborough. Look, Scarborough really, again, is the Bondi of Perth, so it's the most known sort of beach area of Perth. I know they do run some surf championships, especially the Aussie Surf Life-Saving Championships. They do run them there usually once a decade or so is pretty well known for that. But really, Scarborough, again, like, I don't have a photo of this, but it is cheaper than all the suburbs that surround it. So it's way cheaper than City Beach. It's way cheaper than Trigg. You're still picking up properties easily for under 1.25 million here. And the outlook of just Scarborough is awesome. So this is what it looks like. It's basically known as the Bondi of Perth. I'd say the water's probably a lot clearer than Bondi, funny enough, but the waves are probably a lot worse, but the water is really clear. It's a lot quieter than Bondi, should I say, as well. Even on a busy day, you might have 1/30th of the amount of people you have in Bondi, but I guess that's Perth in general. But yeah, Scarborough's a good suburb. It does have a little bit of, public housing around and that kind of thing, but if you get, especially in South Scarborough, a home for under 1.25 million on an original block, you're doing very well, and that will do very well long term as well. Let's look at under 1.5 million, and the suburb I'm going to mention is the suburb of Fremantle. Now, a lot of people probably don't know Fremantle very well, but it's a really beautiful little coastal village, and this is what it looks like from the overhead. So it's very like a towny kind of looking place, right by the harbour and the docks there. Really, really little beautiful pocket there. Really nice places to get coffee, nice places to go for a walk. As you can see, nice area along the pier front there too. So that's a little bit about Fremantle, but really, again, Fremantle is very cheap in a very expensive pocket. So you'll see here, this is just Fremantle. You can see North Fremantle, Mossman Park, Peppermint Grove, all being a lot more expensive than it. You can see South Fremantle there, which is also more expensive than it. And then just south of that also is a suburb called North Coogee, and that's about $3 million, believe it or not. So for people that don't know Perth, it is very cheap and, in my opinion, a better pocket than literally probably North Coogee. So, look, a good suburb to consider there as well. Look, for those that don't really know either, I'd say for people that like a sort of walkable coastal lifestyle, Fremantle was one of the few places kind of in Perth that you can have that. So the other areas that you're probably quite good for that is obviously Scarborough, and I'd say definitely as well you'd probably have Cottesloe. Some people would probably argue Swanbourne also has a good kind of beachy kind of front lifestyle as well, but all those suburbs there apart from Scarborough are basically well over $2 million, so definitely a lot more expensive than Fremantle, which you're still picking Fremantle up for easily under 1.5. I could even say probably under 1.3 in a lot of circumstances. So look, definitely a good suburb to consider in that too. Let's get to the top end of Perth, and that's under $2 million. And I've previously mentioned it, and don't get me wrong, this suburb median has gone above 2 million, but I'm still picking up properties under 2 million here, and that suburb is Claremont. And Claremont, really, it's pretty much in your idealistic part of Perth. It's right between basically your pretty much most expensive beach suburbs of Perth, in that being City Beach and Cottesloe. And it's right next to basically all of your good schools in Perth. So these are the schools that are basically nearby. So Christchurch Grammar School is in Claremont. PLC and MLC are right down the road from it. So you got literally your best schools in the whole city in Claremont. So just something to consider with Perth. Claremont, I'd say, also occupies probably one of the best old money areas of Perth. It's a little bit similar to Sydney in that as well, and probably your more eastern states. The kind of area from Claremont right down to kind of like Mossman Park area, you do get quite a bit more greenery and quite a bit more, should I say, of your actual dirt rather than just sand. Perth is just full of sand everywhere, but this kind of area, it kind of looks a little bit more like your North Shore of Sydney or inner east of Melbourne. So that's just something to consider too for people that don't know the area. Let's get into any budget. And look, it's a funny one here in Perth because Perth doesn't really have many suburbs that are as expensive as somewhere like Sydney. So this is really, should I say, over 2.5 million. And the suburb I'm going to mention here, you'd think it is literally somewhere in Sydney, but that suburb is Mossman Park. So this is just an overhead here of the waterfront area of Mossman Park, and you'll see it looks like somewhere like on Middle Harbour in Sydney, or maybe somewhere in the upper eastern suburbs there in Sydney with these homes. But this is actually a suburb of Perth. But really, like, this is one of your best suburbs of Perth. It's actually fairly cheap for the pocket that it's in. It's right next to pretty much Peppermint Grove, right near, Cottesloe, right near, but basically all your most expensive suburbs of Perth. But your pocket, particularly towards Peppermint Grove, is a great area to buy. And that's simply because, you've got all the best schools there. You've got all the nicest waterfront places there. It's all very low density. You don't really have any apartments, not many anyway, that are there. But this is just a way to describe it. It neighbours the Monaco of Perth. So the Monaco of Perth is Peppermint Grove. And it just says why the Mossman Park property market is a magnet for Perth's well-heeled residents. So that's a good way to describe it in terms of Mossman Park. So I think it is pretty much your best buy if you have any budget in Perth. So definitely something to consider. Look, we're getting the end of this episode, but I thank everyone for watching, and please subscribe to the channel. For those that want to know how to get access to Premier Properties, I have mentioned it a few times, but just go to my website. You do have to sign up for it properly as well and become an actual client of mine. But I'll tell you what, like in this current market, it's definitely a good idea. But anyway, thanks again everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.